It may be one of the rare moments on Capitol Hill when talk is not cheap. In just a few hours, 30 senators, 28 Democrats, and 2 independents will engage in an all-night climate change talkathon, which is expected to last until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. As The Hill reports, the senators involved in Monday's Climate Fest just want to get to a point where lawmakers can agree that climate change is a scientific fact. But in the science-averse Republican Party of the 113th Congress, 160 members, 130 in the House and 30 in the Senate, are on record denying that human activity is to blame for the Earth's warming atmosphere. Not joining tonight's talkathon? Every single Republican who is invited. For a sense of the prevailing mood in the GOP, look no further than last week's CPAC conference. There, at a panel called "Can Americans Survive Obama's War on Fossil Fuel?" That's the name of an actual panel. A man named Alex Epstein of the Center for Industrial Progress, not to be confused with the Center for American Progress, explained that people are concerned about global warming. Those people who are concerned about global warming are practitioners of human racism.
It's a prejudice against the man-made, and I call this human racism. So there's a very deep human racism behind all our discussions where we assume, and it's chemicals, everything. We assume that if something is man-made, that it is immoral and that it's bad, and that distorts the entire quote-unquote scientific discussion.
Human beings so self-loathing that they are apparently racist against themselves. But Alex Epstein and his CPAC audience are not the only ones creating strange, terrifying little worlds for themselves. On Friday, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell told the Cincinnati Enquirer that, quote, "For everybody who thinks it's warming, I can find somebody who thinks it isn't." It is unclear whether those somebodies are actual scientists. NASA, which is comprised of actual scientists, notes broad consensus regarding global warming. It also cites more science showing that the 20 warmest years on record have all occurred since 1981. It also lists all the American scientific societies, science academies, and international bodies that agree with the general principle that human activity is warming up this place we call Earth. Perhaps one day, tomorrow might be too soon, but one day, the same people who are denying this basic fact will be seen a lot like those folks who told Christopher Columbus that he would fall off the Earth because it was flat.
Climate change has become a partisan issue, but it hasn't always been. Nobody has a monopoly on what is a very hard problem. But I don't have much patience for anyone who denies that this challenge is real. We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
Joining me now is the junior Democratic senator from Massachusetts, Ed Markey, and the senior Democratic senator from Hawaii, Brian Schatz. Gentlemen, thank you for speaking with me. Please preserve your voices because I know you will need them this evening. Senator Markey, let me start with you. You are a lion on this issue of climate change. Part of me thinks that this signals that actual legislation is no longer nearly as meaningful as political theater. And, I think, to some degree, Rand Paul and Ted Cruz showed us that. But is that an overly cynical view of what happens on Capitol Hill?
Well, we're going to show that there is life in this issue and that we're going to inject it into the 2014 election cycle. As your report just showed, the science shows the danger. The economics show that there are hundreds of thousands of jobs that can be created here in the United States to deal with the problem. And what we're going to do tonight is show that we're going to change the politics on this issue as well. We're going to inject it into this election cycle. The planet is running a fever. There are no emergency rooms for planets. We have to take the proactive, preventative actions in order to make sure that we do not see the worst catastrophic effects. And we're going to take it right to the Koch brothers, right to the climate deniers, and turn this into a real issue this year.
Senator Markey, but let me ask you, why not do the Talkie Buster or the Talkathon or whatever we're calling it, and also have some legislation in your back pocket? Or do you have some legislation in your back pocket?
Well, all issues go through 3 phases: political education, political activation, political implementation. So we're laying right now the foundation for that political action, for the legislation. We do believe that it is going to be possible for us to extend the wind energy tax breaks, which the Republicans have now allowed to expire. We believe that we're going to be able to extend the solar tax breaks. We believe that there is a lot of concrete action which we can take, and as this year unfolds, the American people are going to hear what a clean energy agenda looks like that can create hundreds of thousands of jobs and save the planet at the same time.
Senator Schatz, let me ask you about the reaction that you've gotten from your fellow Democrats, because there are 30 of you, which is great, but there are also 25 Democrats who are not participating in this, including some red state Democrats and Democrats up for tough re-election fights. Mary Landrieu, Mark Pryor, Kay Hagan, Mark Begich, and Mark Warner. These are names we repeat on a lot of things these days. What was their reaction when you told them you guys were going to do this?
Well, I think this has to be seen in context. This has totally exceeded our expectations in terms of turnout. We were hoping for about a dozen members of the Senate, and it just kept growing and growing over the last couple of weeks. And late last week, early this morning, we found out that all 4 members of the top leadership of the U.S. Senate on the Democratic side are participating. And so 30 members of the Senate don't come down to the floor for really any reason other than to vote. And so this is really a show that we have momentum, that the Senate is stirring on this issue. But Senator Markey is exactly right, that we are still at the stage where we need to engage the American public. The only place where there's still a debate about the reality of climate science is, unfortunately, in the 4 corners of the United States Capitol. Everybody else understands, Democrat, Republican, and Independent across the nation, that climate change is real, it's happening now, and it's solvable. And what we're doing right now is starting the process of engaging the American public, getting it into the electoral context of 2014, and letting them know that we understand how serious this issue is. Not every member is going to make it to the floor tonight, but 30 out of 55 is really extraordinary, and it's a historic moment for all of us.
Senator Markey, let's talk about those folks across the aisle who are not participating. And I went back and read Ryan Liz's piece about the failure of our last big piece of climate change reform, which you, of course, were very, very involved in, Waxman Markey, and then the efforts in the Senate. At that point, and this was only a couple of years ago, Lindsey Graham was saying that carbon emissions were not good for the planet. John McCain was thinking about participating in reform. One gets the sense that these sort of elder Republicans, and I don't necessarily just mean in terms of age, but people who have been in legislation and have seen how far we've come in terms of this debate and how far we've gone back, they know it's real. And yet the sort of public amnesia would seem to verge on the criminal, given their intraction and their complete blinders publicly, rhetorically, on the issue. Do you ever have private conversations with Senators McCain and Graham and say, come on, guys, you were at the table once, can't we get you back?
The way I view this issue is that climate science is something that's undeniable, but our victory is not inevitable. And you are right, there are people on the Republican side of the aisle who do agree with the science. And it's our job to create the political conditions that make it easier for them to partner in a bipartisan way to pass the key legislation. When I introduced the legislation in 2001 and 2003 and 2005 to increase dramatically our fuel economy standards, which President Obama has now used to increase it to 55 miles per gallon by 2026, no one was predicting that we would be standing over President Bush's shoulder in December of 2007 as he signed the bill that made it possible to increase those fuel economy standards. So that's how we view it. We know it can be bipartisan. We know it has to be, and we think that what we're doing is helping to make it easier for those members to cross back over the aisle.
Senator Schatz, one more question to you about Keystone, which obviously is in the news a lot lately. John Kerry is ultimately going to have to make a decision on this. He has been very involved in climate change. Some would say it's one of his signature issues. You guys are doing this talkathon tonight to change the sort of dialogue in around the issue of climate change and fossil fuels. How detrimental to your cause would it be if Senator Kerry approved the Keystone Pipeline?
Well, Ed and I are very much opposed to the approval of the Keystone Pipeline, but there are people who are coming to the floor tonight and tomorrow morning who have a differing view. There's an opportunity right now for us to invite Republicans to come back and be reasonable about this issue, because the political risk for them is that they lose a generation of voters if they don't take this issue seriously. And so Eddie's exactly right. We're got to change the politics on this, and that's what tonight is all about.
I like it when you call Senator Markey Eddie. I think that that's just another reason to love Senator Markey. Gentlemen, may I suggest...
My mother and Brian Schatz. So
and only those two
company.
people. May I suggest a combination of Red Bull, hot lemon, and honey, and however many lozenges you need. Good luck tonight, Senators Markey and Schatz. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on.
Coming up, the CIA versus Congress versus the Department of Justice. The New York Times' Mark Mazzetti weighs in on the raging fight over a potentially explosive intelligence report. That is just ahead.